Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I'm here with David Branscum at Rebel Mining. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Benjamin. It's actually Benjamin. Sorry. I'm in Texas. It's the Spanish coming out.
It's good to see you again, David.
Good to see you too.
We were supposed to have recorded this one in person, so it's we were going to do this one live in Miami,
It's
and
okay.
kind of true to
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just saying. I was
I
going to
would.
say I'm a lot in person, Ben. So this remote is probably a lot safer for you. Probably a lot smarter.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
might have gotten into some trouble if we were in person with a bunch of beers sitting on the table. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yep.
this is good. I appreciate the flexibility and
Of
good to
course.
see you. And I'm excited to jump into a whole bunch of different things, all Bitcoin mining. What I'd love to do for the audience, David, is to give them a glimpse into your background. You have a pretty extensive background in data centers, immersion, all of this led you into Bitcoin mining. So could you walk through your background and then what was the kind of that turning point into Bitcoin mining?
Sure. I definitely have an extensive background. I don't know if there's the maybe one of my the double-edged sword, a pro and a con, is the fact that I have so much experience in a bunch of different weird stuff. I did start out in technical sales. Did a stint working at Dell Computers on the hardware side, more on the enterprise side, right? Like small, medium business and up to global accounts kind of thing. Excuse me. And then bounced around to some tech companies, sold Microsoft technical skills training, their software assurance vouchers, training vouchers, things like that. I worked for a nonprofit, the Better Business Bureau, as a nonprofit for about 3 years. And then I ran a side business providing, not side business, it was a business providing services to other locations, the Better Business Bureau, across the country for about 7 years. That was a pretty good business. I'd bought and sold, basically brokered construction equipment, right? So we would buy large lots of equipment and then piece them off and sell them off to individuals. I trying to think of how I guess I worked for a startup that was in infection control, infection prevention, and then after the pandemic, late 2020, 2021 timeframe, exited out of that company. And so I've been doing quite a bit, and I was really kind of doing nothing, honestly, for a few months, just kind of hanging at home, not really sure what to do. I think the pandemic put a lot of people in that position. So
Yeah.
we, I was literally building I have a small koi pond in my backyard. I say small, I guess it's probably about 2,000, 2,100 gallons, something like that. And that was koi fish was kind of a hobby at the time. And so I decided, hey, I want to build a raised grow bed. So I wanted to pump the fluid out from one side, use all that good fish poop water, right, to feed plants and see, how that would affect them. I'd seen some stuff online. So I'm developing this pump system. I'm developing a design that includes like a bell siphon, which creates a flood and drain. So I'm just keeping busy trying to do some fun stuff. And my neighbor across the street walks over. I'm in my garage, like, what are you doing? So I'm talking to him about it. He said, well, who taught you this? And I said, well, I've just been learning on my own. I said, fluid dynamics is pretty interesting to me. And, they told him about the bell siphon and the physics of it and all that stuff. And he said, do you know anything about immersion? I said, no. He goes, you know anything about Bitcoin mining? I was like, yeah, a little. It's like I'm mining Ethereum right now. And I said, I kind of like to get into some ASICs, but I haven't made the jump. And he said, well, let me tell you what I do. So he was the CEO at Midas Immersion at the time. I think he's still on the a shareholder, but I think he's kind of stepped back as CEO. There's someone new there now, but he's literally my neighbor right across the street.
Oh,
And
wow.
he said, we're looking for some, they had just closed a big deal, like a couple hundred megawatts worth of immersion. And so they were kind of on that wave there and said, we're looking for somebody to handle sales. So I came in as a director of sales, and then maybe a month or two in, they made me VP of business development. Um, and was rolling with them, probably put on another, I don't know, maybe 30, 35, 40 megawatts, something like that. And very quickly, I realized that was kind of my first foray into actually real Bitcoin mining, right? Like I had traditional data center experience, but this was new, and I really liked how just raw and this was, right? It's all about efficiency.
Yeah.
It's all about form follows function, right? It didn't have to look pretty, just had to do a good job. And I was like, that's really interesting. So I started kind of digging into it, making some headway there, and I realized really quickly, Bitcoin mining, just like almost anything else in life, is more about it's more about power and real estate, right? The closer you are to the power generation, the better your cost is, the better,
Yep.
you can mitigate your risk. And that is obviously tied into location as well, right? So um, I didn't want to go into energy. There's a lot of guys out of Houston that already do that. I slowly started kind of moving that direction though. And so I was having a conversation with someone today on the phone. It was kind of interesting. They started out in energy and they're moving this way into Bitcoin. I started out in Bitcoin and the immersion infrastructure and started moving this way to energy. So we're both finding
Yeah.
ourselves in this weird middle spot where those two are coming together. And so I ended up leaving Midas, I guess, about a year ago and going out on my own, and had the second client I had was some gentleman that wanted to build a 16 megawatt facility. I had never done a, complete design on my own. So they were nice enough and patient enough with me to give me 90 days. And I, worked with the GC, worked with the civil engineer, worked with electrical, got specs up, got everything drawn up for the land, and then kind of 90 days over, they had a guy on site, handed that over to them, and said, "Here you go," and they were off and running off to the races. I think they just recently did. It was a 16 megawatt immersion solution. They were lucky; they were working with Arctic Immersion in North
Okay.
Carolina. That and started. So I started working with Stan. He makes some pretty solid solutions, right? It's just a matter of managing scale, and just like everybody new to the industry, properly managing scale and logistics and deployment, stuff like that. So then
Yeah.
helped um, another contact 360 mining, which does off grid gas site mining. Chris Alfano's got some pretty cool stuff he's working on. They We did a couple megawatts of immersion there. So worked with Stan to get that set up and done, and then and in the meantime, kind of during some of this, I was cleaning up some messes. I won't say specifically who, but some other immersion companies that had their design was pretty good, pretty close,
Yeah.
but just wasn't working up to snuff. So I redesigned some water loops on some dual loop systems. Cleaned up a couple of just kind of messes basically, and got them up and running to where they'll at least operate at 100, maybe 105% on an overclock kind of scenario. Just basically trying to save people that investment, right?
Yep.
And did that. I guess had about 3 kind of messes, and I was actually getting more inquiries, and I was honestly getting a little tired of it. It's like I'd rather work with somebody that's got a very
Yeah.
clear cut, business model that it can execute and knows what they're doing. And this on my own thing is fun, but it's it's stressful. And right about that time, I met Neil. I'd already known him and met him a couple times. I had a conversation with Neil Galloway, our COO. He said same conversation that might have said, hey, we've got 2 good sales guys. They're young, they're hungry, they're good. We just want a little bit of maturity, a little bit of experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it took me all of a weekend calling around and checking up on them to find out that, I think these guys know what they're doing. I can trust them. And even the people that were kind of mad that, Neil left previous companies, they still didn't have anything bad to say about him, kind of thing. And so it was a really, I like the team. Our founder is, he's a Chicago guy. He doesn't mess around. He's like, hey, let's get this stuff done, kind of thing. And I like that attitude, right? He holds me accountable. And if he says he's going to do something, I don't have to worry about it. It's going to get done,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So So that's how I got dragged into all of this. And our model there is pretty simple. We're just bringing up sites fast. Somebody signs a agreement with us, we're gonna, even if we don't have a site, we've already got a site lined up, and we're gonna break ground. And in 60 days, hopefully, unless weather permitting, stuff like that, we're gonna have miners energized, right? And so it's just a very clean, very simple, very straightforward process. We just want to simplify that, and make it easy for anybody who wants to get into mining, or if they're already there, we provide a white glove service that enables them to, basically expand their hash rate as fast as they want.
That's fantastic. We will dive deeper into Rebel mining, because I do want to get into that. I really do like the business model. I have to bring you all the way back
Okay.
to the koi fish. so
Yeah.
it's I am blanking on this. I actually went through personally, kind of went through the same journey of, it's not hydroponic, or is it
Aquaculture.
hydroponic?
Aquaculture.
Aquaculture. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but
Yeah.
during the
It's
pandemic, I
it's
got all
it's
into
just
that too.
yeah. It's just hydroponics mixed with the
Yeah,
fish.
so
Yeah.
I actually bought the big IBC tote,
Hmm.
cut it in half, and had the rack on top, and I had everything down in the basement, and my wife looked at me and she's like, I don't think that, because I'm in Minnesota, so it would freeze if I had it outside. She's like, I don't think
Yep.
you're putting 30
Yeah.
gallons of water down in the basement like that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I got super deep down that's fascinating. That
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
catalyst for Bitcoin mining. That's awesome.
It's fun. It's stressful too, because we bought all these really gorgeous fish, and we got all into them. I mean, I learned all the different breeds. I learned all that stuff. We had names for all ours, and for like 2 or 3 years they were great. And then a great blue heron started showing up and just slowly picking those fish
Oh,
off. So so it's
no.
yeah, it's I think there's still, the pond's kind of overgrown. I like purposely let a lot of the plants like overgrow to try to kind of protect it. There may still be three in there. When I do my spring cleaning here in a month, I'm going to find out if they're still in there or not. But there, it was it it's a we just love animals, right? Like
Yeah.
we've got a
Yeah.
dog. We just adopted two cats. My son's got a bearded dragon upstairs. We've had hamsters. We've had fish. We just, it's, yeah. My son had
Most people go with tilapia. I'm impressed that you went straight to koi fish. You were
I
like,
just,
we're gonna go koi fish.
I just liked koi fish. I've liked them for a long time. I grew up in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, and there's a beautiful uh, Japanese garden in Fort Worth that is now a part of the big botanical gardens. They eventually joined together. I don't know how if it's buyout or merge or whatever, but they're now all part of the same thing. But and I remember growing up, going to see them, and they're just fun. These big, beautiful fish that get to like 3 or 4 feet, and the
Yeah.
patterns are amazing. And yeah, so it's fun. I don't have what it takes, I think, patience wise, to grow like 5 or 6 generations of them like they do, but it's fun.
Well, and the I mean, that whole system is so finicky. I mean, you've got pH balances. You have to have the
Mhm.
right, this everything has to be just perfect for
Yep.
those systems to work really well. So I have to scratch the itch one last time, folks. I promise this is a Bitcoin mining show. But were you watching? There was this Australian guy who had a massive backyard setup. Is that who you were watching to kind of learn the ins and
Uh,
out of all this?
I think I know who you're talking about, but there's tons of people
Okay.
online that are doing it, right? There's a guy in Thailand that like the floor of his house is all above his personal,
Jeez.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's weird. Like he can just pick up a floorboard and and feed fish, right? So it's a I think it's a fun hobby. Um, and I think I will eventually get into it, but harder. But it's like, yeah, the blue heron is not the only one that killed fish, right? Like a pipe or a tube goes busted, and
Yeah.
water leaves, and then you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I've got 1 foot of water left in my in my thing, and that fish is stuck in the shallow end, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you have, or you turn on the hose and then you forget to turn it off, and next thing you know, all the good water's gone out, and there's too much chlorinated water, and you've killed a couple of it. It's just
Yeah.
it is a very delicate balance. They're not as hardy. They are strong, but they're not as hardy as like goldfish you get at the state fair, right? They're
Or
just
tilapia, or yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
tilapia, you could put them straight in tap water, chlorine,
I
whatever,
know
and they're fine.
they're
Yeah,
animal. Yeah.
they're fine. But like the koi fish are like, yeah, you have to take care of them and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but it's still something I enjoy it. I'll eventually get back into it, but I'm going to remodel the pond so it's uh, protected
That's awesome. Yeah.
from birds and from me. So we'll see.
Yeah. Very cool. So knowing that was kind of what led you into immersion mining in the first place. Immersion mining, it's pretty new, especially in the Bitcoin mining space. It's actually still pretty new, even in just the traditional data center space. Even
Oh yeah,
though, I mean,
yeah.
they were more on the scene. From my experience, they're more on the scene in two-phase immersion. So maybe let's do like a deep dive on immersion.
Sure, sure.
Um, because it's complicated, it's tricky, but it's kind of the sexy thing in the Bitcoin mining space. And I think a good place to start is the complicated nature of it worth it?
Depends on who you ask, but yeah,
Okay.
it's I think it's interesting though because I mean the single phase to some degree was tested out like way back when, like in the 50s and 60s, people were doing high power machines, early computers, and things. Some of them had dielectric fluid that they used, mineral oil, things like that,
Mm,
to just kind of move the heat away. Um, there was, I mean, it's a different type, but dielectric fluid's been used in transformers, for gosh, it's like 60, 70 years,
yeah,
right?
long
For a
time.
long time. Just to kind of because of its properties, it basically it like a fluid does. You pour fluid into something and it naturally takes that shape. Well, you put heat into a dielectric fluid, it naturally normalizes the heat across, right? So if you can put it in even just a pool, eventually that heat's going to be pulled away from like right here over to the other end of the pool or whatever. So it's been used a lot. Yeah, the two phase is like, I mean, it's an unbelievable technology, right? It really is impressive. Um, but I think the challenge is the cost to engineer it, airtight, things like that. And if you're going to run it in a place that's where the temperature is already really low, so it doesn't, completely evaporate or dissipate or disappear, so you don't have to engineer something so tight. Well, at that point, you don't really need the cooling effects of it, right? You can pretty much just do it if you're running 60 degrees Fahrenheit air into you can just use that. So it
Hmm.
depends on the application, and I guess the question is back to your question: is it worth it? It really just depends on the variables. I'll be the first to tell people and say, look, if you're up in uh, if you're mining up in Canada and it's like your top degree in the summer is like 78, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have and you have really good air quality and you don't have a problem with pollen or particulate matter or anything like that, just run air. I mean, there's no point in
Yeah.
doing that, right? Just make sure your filtration's good and things like that. But if you're in a desert climate, if you're in a more semi-arid region, you got a lot of particulate matter flying through the air. You got dust, or you're near a water source where it's incredibly humid. And I have this conversation a lot with people. You can get away with like a water curtain in an air cooled facility as long as the air quality is good, and
Okay.
you can get, you know what I mean, and you can get along with just air without as long as the temperature is low and the humidity is low. But if you get particulate matter or dust and moisture together mixing through your running through that miner in an air cooled environment, that's when you start to see serious problems. That's when you start to see the caked on stuff. And there's also, cancel it out.
Oh, there we
Um,
go. Do you have another
we
call
had,
come through?
but yeah, you also get there's a certain amount of like dust and particulate matter, especially like in West Texas with dust storms and things that you can't even see it, but you don't know it, but it's getting into the fan motor, all that kind of stuff. So dielectric, like a little safe, warm cocoon kind of thing, right? It does eliminate moisture. Over time, eventually you will get a little bit there, but if it's, the idea is that the moisture will hit the top, the ambient heat is enough to kind of keep that moisture from penetrating. And then if you can dump water into a dielectric fluid and literally just watch it beat up, it won't attach itself to a miner. It'll just go to the bottom. Now, you don't want to leave that in there long term, but it really is a safer environment. Then the other side of that is people would say, okay, well, if you can overclock, right? It is more efficient to use dielectric fluid, but the question also becomes, okay, if I'm using S9s or I'm using miners that are $1,000, $1,200 a piece, overclocking them even 25, 30%. You take out the percentage of the number of miners you don't need to take advantage of your power. Whatever that cost is, you compare that with what the cost of your per megawatt, immersion is. It's really simple math. If it doesn't pay for itself, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Just financially, if you're just looking at it strictly from a capex standpoint, so capital expenditure standpoint.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of a yes or no question, is or isn't question. It just depends on how you're going to mine, what you're going to mine. Do you want to overclock? Do you not? And that all comes down to what your power cost is. And so it really just depends on what your operating expenses are and your capital expenses are. Put those together. Sometimes immersion makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I really appreciate the nuanced answer. I'm finding more and more. I'm running into people who talk about immersion and they're just zealots. I mean, you can't convince them that immersion anywhere in the world is not the play. And a lot of them
Sure.
lean on the overclocking and the lifespan of the hardware. Do we have data to show that it really does increase the lifespan? And I only ask because I know that some of the fluids actually eat away at the plastics in the power core. I mean, it nibbles away
Sure.
at the silicon. There's all
So
sorts of stuff that happens in those
I
fluid
think it's
baths.
valid.
Is the lifespan
We
thing a
don't
valid
have like what
argument
I'd
there?
call a comprehensive study. I have seen one or two that are not like public knowledge, that are basically all they are is like fluid compatibility tests, right? So they take a bunch of different types of computer components, basically ASIC components individually, and set them in, let them soak in this in like a humid environment, and they warm it up to about that. Man, sorry. If I didn't think I
There
would
we go.
lose the connection, I would turn my airplane mode on. That was not smart. I should have figured that out ahead of time. But anyway,
That's okay.
so it's like they would test it like that. They heat the fluid up to about 120, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and then just see how the components react, right? But that's just testing. That's not right, like a live, testing. And really, we're so early in this. Number one, we don't have enough time and what I'd consider a large enough subject to make any kind of real call on that. Um, and two, you'd have to get everybody who's doing it to share their data, which right now, I don't blame them. Not a lot of companies going to want to
Yeah.
share all of that stuff. And so those two things would have to happen. There are some studies out there though, from like, I want to say the 78, something like that time frame, where they were just studying regular computer components, right? They were doing like early benchmark testing for a number of different chips and mostly processors and things like that, right? And then some RAM. But all they were doing was testing components against heat changes. And so you can kind of take a 1 + 1 = 2 standpoint on this, right? is the immersion going to help them? Well, we do know that any kind of computer component, whether it be silicon or metal, is going to swell when it heats up and it's going to contract when it cools, right? That's just the nature of physics. So we
Yep.
know that and we know this from just even your basic home computers, servers, high power compute, hyperscalers, stuff like that, that the more that heat and temperature changes, the more damage it does because it swells and contracts, it swells and contracts, it swells and contracts. Well, over time, that's one of the reasons why over time, you need a hash board repaired. If you have you have a chip that's just, it's not working on that board anymore, or you have a heat sink that all of a sudden just falls off, a
Yep.
lot of that is just because of the temperature changes. It's up and down. So with immersion, your goal is to um, normalize that temperature. Whether you're overclocking, underclocking, pushing right at 100, doesn't matter. You just want that, whether it's below freezing or you know below freezing or 65, 70 degrees Celsius outside, right? Whatever it is, you're just going to that miner is going to stay at whatever operating temperature you've designed the system around. So we know that it affects computer components and the same type that use the same type of materials in ASICs, and we know that immersion normalizes the temperature and keeps it steady over a long period of time. Those two together, 1+1. I think it's safe to theorize and say that,
Okay.
right? But I don't, and I
Yeah.
know there's probably people out there a lot smarter than me that are working on, putting those types of models and things together. I know Brains has done a little bit of studying with it, especially where theirs is more on the overclock versus joules per terahash efficiency kind of viewpoint. But it's still very similar. If they can maintain that temperature for long periods of time, it's pretty safe to say they're going to last. The real question is not, are they going to last? Because the S9s have proven they're going to last even in air. The question is,
Yep.
are they going to remain profitable? That's really how all technology moves. Is something going to come along that's more efficient or that's better at that process and replace it? That's the thing.
I completely agree. So I understand what you're saying. It's more of an extrapolation of, like you said, 1+1=2. Time will continue to show
Sure.
us, the people that are willing to release the data. So I'd be curious because I am curious about the long-term performance, the longevity of the machines. Will that be increased from this? Because I'm I'm in the camp that believes we're kind of at the bleeding edge on silicon technology, chip manufacturing capabilities, and I think we're going to see marginal efficiency
Mm-hmm.
increases. Whereas, like the last halving, I mean, you were seeing like leaps and bounds in the technology. The hash rates were going from like 20 terahash machines to 70,
Sure.
80. I mean, there were huge
Sure.
leaps there where I think we may not see that. I don't
I
know. So I'm in that
Yeah,
camp.
there's two schools of thought on that. You've got the idea that, okay, there's always, as long as it's profitable, there's always going to be somebody pushing the bounds of that and trying to do that. But then I'm a big fan of Peter Thiel's book Zero to One, right? And he talks about how people assume technology is going to continue, but it really doesn't, right? I mean, we had the dark ages and bad things happened and nobody made anything, right, for a long time because of the plague and some other things,
Yep.
right? So it really just depends on it does take people, right? It takes the people that are on that edge that are willing to walk and push that envelope to continue. Um, I mean, I know at least even in this bear market, there's a handful of people that I've talked to that are trying to push on that chip level, right? Some of them want to bring chip manufacturing to the U.S. Some of them are just pushing for new technologies, smaller nanometer chips. The smaller the chip is that still operates on the same efficiency level means it'll do the same thing, just less power, right? So it is possible.
Yep.
Um, but I think you're right. I think an argument could be made that we're not going to have as big a leap and jump. That is typical of technology also, right? Like it's, you can only double cores so many times in a server or a laptop or desktop or even phone computer. You can only double core so many times before it's like it's just using more power than we need, kind of thing. So at some point, it'll be very interesting to see. It's like photovoltaics are the same way, right? I think solar is great, but somebody needs to design something that's like 3 or 4 times more efficient to really make it a viable source of energy for us. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So like I said at the open, I did want to get more into rebel mining, kind of a clunky pivot, but
your
I'd love
segue
to
is great, man.
hear more
That's a
about.
fantastic segue. It's so smooth.
It's-
It's so smooth.
yeah, it was
Speaking of
spot
rebel
on,
mining,
nailed it.
yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah. So I'd love to dive into
sure,
rebel. I'd love to hear. You guys have you know a very cool business model and approach to your
yeah,
capacity and how you work with your customers. So maybe just go a little bit deeper on rebel, your strategy, what you guys are working on.
sure. So it's there was we had a really good conversation when I first the first phone call I had with our CEO and with Neil, and the whole conversation was great. I mean, but there was a couple things that kind of stuck out to me, and I guess it's stuff that I kind of subconsciously knew, right, through my other dealings with other companies and contracted for other people, working with clients in the space, right. Um, it was an interesting comment they made that was basically said, there's a lot of people in this space that are getting praised for doing good things, but in any other industry, what they're doing would be considered like the absolute bare minimum. You know what I mean? And it's not to put down anybody at what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes an awful lot of work, hard work, and courage to go into a space that is brand new, right? And that's kind of one of the fun things about Bitcoin is you get some of the smartest minds and some of the most confident people from other industries that are like, oh, I did well over here, I can do it over here, kind of thing, right? So that's a good positive thing. But the other side of that is people that want to get into it early that are coming in and there's not a high level of professionalism, or what they were in is so far removed from what Bitcoin mining is, whether it be energy
Yep.
or data centers or infrastructure or electrical or engineering or all this stuff, right? They like Bitcoin because of how wide it spreads and how much it changes. You know, so it changes so many things that we touch and see every day. So it brings in all
Yeah.
these people that they were experts and amazing in their field, right? And they just want to be a part of it because it's new and exciting. But it's so different that a lot of times there is a miscommunication on really just execution is all kind of it comes down to, right? So you're saying, it's like you do something that would be considered normal in traditional markets that are established, what's required, and you do it here, and all of a sudden everybody's like,
Yep.
oh, they're amazing, kind of thing. And so and so it's not a good or a bad thing, right? It's just an observation. But it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just like any other market or environment. The people that are going to do the that are going to be the most successful are going to uh, they're going to be able to execute, and they're not going to get overextended. They're not going to get over their skis. They're not going to, people. There's been an awful lot of. I mean, you talk about, Compute North. You talk about these are not related in any way, shape, or form, but like FTX. You talk about Gox. I mean, you go back and just see all the terrible things that have happened with crypto as a whole,
Yep.
or whatever, and everybody looks at it. It's like, oh, it's terrible, and but really we whine about it for about a week and then we're done. But it's like people see that and they say it's bad, and I'm like, it's kind of necessary. That's the industry growing. That's the industry figuring itself
Yeah.
out. They're like, oh well, Gary Gensler, we don't want, we don't need it's just no regulate. And I'm like, Well, if you ever want, Bitcoin to become a standard that everybody can use, at some point there's going to have to be some form of regulation. The,
That's right.
I'm a bit of a libertarian, right? I don't want them telling me to do anything, but if but there's a lot of people out there that won't touch Bitcoin until they feel like it's kind of generally accepted by the government, and that's fine. That's their viewpoint, right? So there has to be some level of protections for people. We don't want another FTX thing. We don't, all that kind of stuff. So, but those things are going to happen. And so what I liked about Rebel was that he's like, we're just going to keep things simple, right? What do I need to do? I need to go find sites. Okay. Well, how many can we get? Well, whatever we want. And we're like, really? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we want to scale big, we have the ability to do that. If we just move, one little site at a time, that's fine. Whatever the market, we've got that figured out. Okay. Well, what about, supply chain? Oh, I bought a bunch of equipment. What do you mean you bought it? Well, we're buying a bunch of equipment. I've got a lot of equipment in stock. So the second we say go, that equipment gets shipped to the site. By the time they've leveled the site and done the land and the civil stuff, we're ready to go. Okay, well, but that's dangerous. I mean, are you over leveraged on that? I mean, do we have, no, we bootstrap the whole thing. Okay, well, I mean, are we? I guess we're probably dependent on whoever we can find locally to build the data center. No, this guy I've known since like 7th grade. We've been doing construction for 25, 30 years together. They know how to do this. They know how to build a data center. It's not a problem. They know we have the electrical engineering. We've got all. I was like, oh, okay. So what are we missing? And they're like, miners to plug in. And I was like, well, I know a few of those people in the industry that need that space. And they're like, great, come work with us, help us fill it out, kind of thing. It's some of the best business models and best ideas in the world they're very simple, right? And so he's building data centers. We're not overextending ourselves. If the industry just decides to shut down tomorrow, wouldn't be the greatest thing in the world for us, right? But nobody'd completely lose their shirt. We'd all just go try to find other things to do. But I don't think that's going to happen. And if it continues on the path that I think it's going to continue on, what we're trying to do is just get that machine ready to run. And then on the next really big push, we're going to be able to, our goal is to be able to help as many people as possible plug in miners, increase that hash rate, secure the network, and just basically secure the future of Bitcoin, especially in the United States and in Texas, where most of our sites are.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about you guys' approach, you mentioned very briefly, is it's more of these like bite-sized chunks.
Yeah,
it's not go build the hyperscale 300, 700, a gigawatt site. Be nimble, be lean, don't get over your skis. I love that approach. When you guys are sourcing the power for these little, and I say little, I mean 25
I know, right? Yeah.
megawatt.
I keep accidentally saying microsites, and it's not a microsite's like 400 or 500 kW, in my opinion. That's like a shop, like a small, workshop.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, 24, 8 to 24 is kind of the sweet spot. And we've just found that there's an awful lot of, if you can, build the relationships and get that system in place, that's kind of a good size to where you can, if someone wants 100 megawatts, right? Okay, we'll do 4 24 megawatt sites and give them, 96 megawatts or whatever. You can do that. But the 8 to 10, let me take a step back and let's kind of think macro a little bit. When you think about, because you're talking about those big 300-400, I mean, you got the riots, you got the Marathon Digitals, right? You got that Saxit group that's doing something down, like 300 megawatts or something. So you got those things, those opportunities. That's great. I mean, guys that can put that together are impressive, right? It's a ton of work to make a deal like that happen. And so it is impressive, right? But I also feel like you have that, and then you've got basically like, you know, the plebs from like, you know, even 10 years ago, right? That were started this stuff with, 480 graphics cards, and they're slowly moving up in, and then they went to ASICs and they're doing that stuff. Well, then some of those evolved into what you now see are kind of what I call smaller sites. They're hosting 5-10 megawatts, in a building
Yep.
somewhere, and they're doing a great job, right? And they're slowly growing. But to me, you have 10 megawatts and you have like hundreds. That's a huge gap, right? So I feel like uh, just like the American economy, when mid cap, medium sized businesses and companies are doing well, the economy's doing well, right? They're
Yes.
kind of a
Yep.
telltale sign, and so I feel like that next big move here between now and the halving, but mid cap, right? Like private equity, that they can't ignore it anymore. And that's
Yep.
another reason why I think legislation is important, because if there's a little bit, they feel like they're a little bit more protected, which I might be a
Yep.
false assumption, but depending on who you ask and what your opinion is, but they feel like they're a little bit more protected, and so they feel like they can jump in there. So like small family offices that have you know um, a group that's putting together 10, 20, they can do $100 million deals. They're not billions and billions, but they're $100 million could get you a lot of mining. And so if we can be ready to
Yeah.
cater to kind of that medium ground, and those smaller guys could also, when Bitcoin increases, they're going to have higher demand too, and they're going to move up this way. And if they can't build that infrastructure or have that, if we're there ready to provide that, well, then they can just aggregate, the more retail clients, pull them together, and then we only deal with that one. That's where we want to sit. I kind of want to be, small, medium to large business, and I think that what we're trying to do is set ourselves up to be able to be kind of the go-to company in the industry for that spot. You'll still have the, 1 gigawatt, Lanciums and Riots and, stuff like that's fine, right? The
Yeah.
network needs that.
Yep.
But I feel like the beauty of Bitcoin is anybody who's willing to take that initiative and take that risk and put their money in, can benefit from it. So that's kind of what our focus. So that kind of coming full circle, that 8 to 24 megawatt is really just perfect for that. You can do 1 or you can do 8.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I really do also share in the belief that there is a large gap and a lot of room for that mid tier in terms of size and scale to step in a professional way. So it's exciting. How are the conversations with the power companies when you guys are approaching them about this? So predominantly in Texas, which I would guess you're predominantly on ERCOT's
Mm-hmm.
grid. So how do those conversations go? Are you guys like going in talking about Bitcoin mining right out of the gate, or is it data centers? Like, I'd love to hear the approach for the power companies.
Sure. Well, I mean, the good news is I've got somebody, that our parent company is the one that handles all that, right? So the good news is I don't have to have a lot of those conversations. I can get up in the morning, plug in, start having conversations with people, knowing that our power is there and we've got the price. So I've got a good product I can put out there to people. So that is immediately eliminates a lot of stress, right? Um, I think all it really comes down to is just finding, having those relationships and knowing that, we're not going to overextend ourselves, right? So if we get signed up on a site and we start buying that power, right? They know we're going to take care of it, right? We're not overextended. We're not coming and taking off big, massive chunks where you either, win 110% or you lose by -30. It's not, that's I
Yeah.
think the key, right? Some of that is just, um, some of that is just the way we've chosen to take smaller chunks, right? Smaller bites. So that's one. The second is also really just, finding the right kind of opportunities. I mean, I hate the phrase, I hear it a lot. It's like, we're still early, right? But really, when it comes to the network, especially from an infrastructure standpoint, we are still early. People don't understand, not just in Texas, but in the U.S., how much energy is not just available, but is also really wasted. We don't have an energy production problem. We have an energy distribution problem.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and if I go to an energy company, or not a let's say an ERP or a rep or a retail energy partner or whatever, and they're saying, okay, we're producing and buying this power from power generation, and we've got to distribute it. Well, right now, if we sell it to the homes and businesses in this area, we're going to lose 15 to 30% of the power that we buy, right? Because you have to buy it and it has to be turned on, and then you lose some of it during transmission, you lose some of it during, non-peak times. It just disappears. It either it gets grounded and goes into the ground and disappears, or it dissipates in heat through the air, right? So if you're a business owner and you're like, hey, I'm doing 100% of the work, but I'm getting paid 65% of the money, right? If someone comes along and says, we'd like to buy that other 35% from you. Oh, and by the way, when you need it for other things, we'll turn off. We don't care.
Yep.
Right? Kind of thing. It makes good financial sense. It just does, right? We're not wasting energy. That energy is being made anyway. It's just disappearing. So you either let it disappear, or we buy that energy from the providers. They're able to profit more off of their energy, and they are able to use that money to, further expand and maybe down the road figure out a smarter way to distribute power in a way that we don't lose 15 to 35% of it through transmission, right?
Yep.
I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's batteries. I don't know if it's a different type of transmission. I don't know. But I know that Bitcoin mining is a way to enable that kind of innovation way past, what we're actually doing, even just through Bitcoin, which in and of itself is an amazing innovation. So I think it's just getting the right people to understand that. And the good news is, when you walk in and tell somebody, hey, we're going to increase your profits, you got a good ear automatically. I think that's what I really don't understand about, the whole Bitcoin narratives that we're, it's not about the energy and the conservation. It's about the fact that we are doing something good that other people have tried to do and couldn't figure out. That's one. And the other thing is just, we just don't like all the attention. We want the attention back over on us, so Bitcoin's bad, kind of thing. And that,
I think it's, a little bit of a laziness thing too, which is why they just slap, easy clickbaity things on it, like it's bad, it's consuming too much power. And one of the things that I really want to do is get a better understanding of the incentives around like wind farms and these solar farms. I mean, there are industrial sized and scaled wind farms and solar farms that the amount of curtailment that they have to dump is unbelievable. And my understanding of it, not an expert, I'm hoping to talk to more people about it, is that they are running those types of generation assets for credits from the government. And the government is subsidizing and giving credits for running, even though it's not needed. So it's this like kind of sick incentive mechanism. So it's fascinating to me.
So I mean, the bulk of that is American taxpayers basically paying for that, right? We paid for it. And while I think there is a benefit to it, the problem is, again, it's not the power generation, it's the distribution, right? So where we have to put a wind farm or a solar farm, to make it work, and some of that is, physically, geographically, where it has to be, and then some of that is just, we're not going to put, a big wind farm like too close to an airport, right? That's not smart. We're not going to put, we're not going to. And then I'm like, well, I don't want, big power lines and big giant turbines. I don't want to walk out of my back porch and, not be able to see the sky kind of thing. Some of that sentiment is there too. But it's, the amount that we've built is really kind of staggering. And the amount of energy it produces is actually good. Like the amount of energy it produces would move the needle if we could actually connect it in a meaning and transmit the power in a meaningful way. The problem is right now, like I remember seeing the statistic where they keep talking about, well, it's like we've spent all this money on this and it hasn't even moved the needle as far as energy production globally or especially just specifically in the US. And it has, and it hasn't, right? It depends on how you look at it. The amount of energy that's produced there is significant. The amount of energy we're actually getting to use from it is not significant. So that's the challenge there. I would think that a government that has subsidized all of this, right? And that's a whole other call. That's a whole other talk if we want to have. I almost made a left turn down the Capitol Hill rabbit hole, and that would have been negative. We're not going that. I'm coming back. I'm backing up. But I would think that a government that has put that much money and effort into it would just be chomping at the bit to have Bitcoin miners set up underneath every single wind turbine in the U.S. I would think that, but it's a political game. There's a lot of parties there and stuff like that, and a lot of people that don't want Bitcoin to succeed because they lose some power there. So it is a challenge, but I mean the opportunity there for Bitcoin miners is huge. Whether it be solar that's out in the middle of nowhere, whether it be wind, but I mean we still have places in the United States that are in the middle of nowhere, dry deserts where, I mean, we could go pump oil and gas for, just ridiculous amounts of oil and gas, right? And not even make a dent in some of those areas with Bitcoin mines. And right now it's cheaper to drill a well than it is to put up one of those wind turbines. And, you're probably going to get, we have the geology and geologists to actually, tell us to say, well, here's what the curve looks like. Here's what it is. We can, more accurately figure out, okay, this is how much power we're going to have. Wind only works typically, it's most of it at night. And then solar obviously only works during the day, right? Gas and oil will work 24/7, right? If you're pumping.
When you want it to.
Yeah. So there again, like I said, with solar or anything else, somebody's got to really come up with a realistic, solution for a battery or something that allows us to do that. When you're looking at wind and solar, you're literally looking at, again, the power you're going to lose, right? So you're saying, okay, well, if I have enough solar to produce 100 megawatts, which would be a massive solar farm, right? But 100 megawatts.
Yep.
I can really only mine with 33 megawatts because I'm only going to I can mine with 33, and then 33% is a loss of efficiency, and the other 33% is charging batteries. And then I run, that whole cycle starts all over, right? So it's just a matter of efficiency.
Are you guys, is Rebel working with any renewable sites, any renewable generators?
Well, yes and no. So all of our sites are on grid, right? We like to go, we do have a couple of spots where we're vertical, where we actually own the sub and stuff like that, right? So we're buying power from a producer. But all for the foreseeable future, it'll be grid connected sites right now. So but we'll go wherever, right? So if I've got a wind farm that's got a sub close enough to it, that's where we'll go. Right now, the mix that we're at, I think in that area is, mostly we're in that kind of triangle, that Midland, Odessa area, right? And West Texas, the Permian Basin. So I'd say about 2/3 of it is probably, it's about a third coal. Coal, get natural gas, and then the other third is mostly wind, and then there's just like tiny little, bits and pieces of other stuff.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. But again, it's like I'm kind of agnostic. It's like if the power is there and it's good, it can be biogas, it can be coal, it can be natural gas, it can be solar, it can be I don't care, right? It can be hydro. It doesn't matter. What we
Yep.
just want to do is we want to find a good, reliable site where we can, deliver 95% uptime, even in that harsh Texas weather. That's what we're shooting for.
Awesome. Yeah. It's, again, I think that it speaks a lot to just the nimbleness of your guys' business model. So I was just curious if that was in the pipeline for you. And so David, just to make sure we're watching the
Mm-hmm.
clock, and just being respectful of time. One of the things that I like to ask my guests is if you were to give some advice to young entrepreneurs looking to get into Bitcoin mining, what kind of advice would you give, or just, from your years of experience, what would you say to someone looking to get into the space?
I just have to get really serious, look them in the eye, and say, "Don't do it. Don't do it." No, no. It's we're talking about the us. I have this conversation quite a bit, right? People are like, "What do I do?" Um,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking to myself, "Well, that's really funny. You think I got it figured out. I appreciate that. It's very flattering." Um, it's very very flattering, but no, I don't. I don't have all the answers. But it's been. I mean, the last few years has been, very just, purely transparent. It's been very stressful, right? I've moved around uh, a lot, and you never know, where you jump if that's going to be kind of the place you stick, right? You're optimistic and
Yeah.
you're hopeful, and so first off, you got to have that kind of attitude, right? You have to be, um, you know, uh, you have to be a little crazy and compulsively positive even when things are bad. But that's true about any kind of entrepreneurship. Um, I think it's really so. Let me give you kind of a little anecdote on that. So I had finished up a couple of projects like just 6 months ago, right? And I was done, and I thought to myself, I don't really have another project like lined up, right? Eventually one came
Yep.
through, but it's real easy to be like, okay, I got to clinch up and I got to go into survival mode, right? Like I'm not spending any money, I'm not going to any conferences, I'm not doing any, or whatever, because you've been there before where you're like, spent money in it, I put forth effort and nothing came of it, right? Um,
Yep.
One of the things I just tried to keep doing is no matter what, throw your feet on the floor, get up, be active, go for a walk, go to the gym, whatever you like to do to kind of move around and keep going. And then basically just stay connected and show up, right? Just keep showing up. Um, it was for us, or for me personally, it was, Texas blockchain events. I was lucky enough to have some good friends that are in the mining industry. They're not just, business associates, but friends, true friends. And they're like, "Hey, we're going to do this. You're going to come." I'm like, "Oh, okay," kind of thing. It's like you need to be there.
Yep.
Where is he?
Yep.
Where are you? Why aren't you here? Kind of stuff, and holding that accountable. So, you know, um, just keep showing up until you make those kinds of contacts and connections. And it's not like they're going to, just automatically, save you or whatever, right? But you never know when you. I mean, the chat I was having that led to this job, I wasn't even having with Neil. He was literally, his back was to my back. He was having a conversation over here and he overheard my conversation where I said, he thought I was full
Yeah.
time at that last gig. And I said, "Well, no, I'm a contractor. I've done some design work and I've, brought a couple projects their way, but I like what I'm doing, but I don't know if that's where I'm going to, stick around or end up long term. I don't know. We'll have to see." And then it was a week later that he's like, "Hey, overheard your conference. I was eavesdropping in," kind of thing. It's just keep showing up. And then the other part of it
Yeah.
is just never stop learning right? Like, I mean, my family makes so much fun of me because it's like no matter what the conversation is, somehow I always manage to turn it to Bitcoin. And it's not, you know, it's like my family's normies and I'm not, you know. So it's one of those things where it's I'm obsessive about it. Like I enjoy it so much, whether I'm making money on it or not, whether I have a job or not, I'm going to keep learning. So during that short period when I didn't have a project, I talked to the other people I knew in the industry. What are you guys doing? What do you need? Oh, you need generators because you're going to do a gas site. Okay. What do I know about generators? Nothing. Let me see what I can learn. And then I just go online and I'm trying to understand, you know, how a genset is built, right? Can you actually wind those coils for 415 instead of 480 volt power? You know, it's like this, I didn't even know I needed that question until I did some studying, you know. So it's just I just no matter what, I always want to watch a podcast. I always want to listen to somebody doing something different than me. I'm very intrigued by the political side, Satoshi Action Fund, Texas Blockchain Commission,
Yep.
Council.
Yep.
I'm very intrigued by some of the thought leaders in the space. Chris Calicott over at Trammell Ventures, because I don't do that. You know, I'm not in. I don't do venture capitalism, right? So it's venture capitalist. So it's like that those things that I don't know, right? Natalie Smolinski, right, is probably one of the smartest people I've ever heard talk, right? If they're on a podcast, any of those
Yep.
people are on a podcast, I'm going to listen to them because it gives me another dimension of what I'm doing. And down the road, you never know how that's going to help you in your career long term. So it's just keep showing up and keep learning, even if it's something that is just bores the crap. Ordinals, oh my god, it just bores the crap out of me. I hate it. Right? I love all the guys
Yeah.
over at Luxor. You know, I really like Nick, but I mean, he tried to explain ordinals to me one time, and I'm just like, I don't need it. I don't need it. But it's like I'm going to
Yep.
get a Taproot wallet, and you can give me an ordinal, and that's the only one I'll ever have. And he's like, okay. So it's like, but I don't. You know, there's a lot of this that I don't understand, but you may not understand, you may not be your thing, but you need to just kind of know what's going on, kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
just
Absolutely.
keep showing up and keep learning. Is it? Stay in
I
school,
love
kids.
it.
Stay in
It's
school.
yeah.
Don't do drugs and stay in
Yeah.
school.
You don't do drugs and stay in school. You're speaking straight to
That's
my
right.
heart with the resiliency and just be hungry to learn. Yeah, I mean, I had a similar path into this industry. I mean, I'd been trying for 2 years, over 2 years. I mean, it's like almost 3 years just to get
I
into the industry in some
yeah.
capacity. And
I realize, man,
yeah,
I've
Taras,
been
yeah,
incredibly lucky to be kind of pulled in and get a little bit of what I consider to be a paid education. So, well, Taras is a force to be
absolutely.
reckoned
Yeah.
with. I'm surprised he didn't drag you in earlier, actually.
You know, he was in, yeah, I mean, he was mentoring me and I kept, it was, you know, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And how does this look? And am I going to get my head taken off if I do this kind of, you know, it's just, you know, I don't know what I don't
So,
know. And so the last of those conversations, it was, why don't you come on
yeah.
board? And we made it work. So yeah, you're speaking to my heart with the resiliency. So that's a fantastic way to end the show. David, this was an absolute
Thank you,
pleasure.
Ben.
Sorry again we couldn't do it in
All right.
person, but I'll make it up for you. I'll come down to Austin and we'll share beers in person
Anytime.
soon.
And barbecue. Barbecue more than beer. Barbecue.
And
Yep.
barbecue. Yes.
All right, man.
All right. Well, David, you take
Thanks, you
care.
too, Ben. Good to see you.